Hello, Mandy.
Hey Sam, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well.
It's a weird thing. Like, do you wave in videos? I
I
wave
know,
in all of them, and I'm like, it's kind of awkward, but I don't know.
right? Because I feel like your screen it just never seems like it moves as fast as what you actually wave.
It's true. So I usually just like hold a hand up. That's like, it's so weird. Oh my goodness. Well, how are you, dear friend?
I am well. How about yourself?
you know, Hanging in there. It's a loaded question. I feel like we're finally getting to the point of not answering that question anymore of like, I'm okay, I'm good. It's like always was, I'm good. And now it stirs up so much conversation between
Right? You're like, got many things. I
yeah,
don't know how much time we have.
I know exactly. It's like, well, where are you going? I can tell you. Well, let's hear about you and about what you're doing and your hustle and all of the good stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm Mandy. I run a business called Double Decker Vintage. We are an online and mobile vintage shop that is actually housed in a double decker bus that I went to England and brought back to the States and converted into a moving shop. At least we're normally moving. We haven't moved since November due to all the craziness, but
Oh my gosh, you're
you
coming up
know,
months, man. That's
it
insane.
has. I always put them away for the winter because I don't know if you've ever drove anything even as big as like an RV or anything like that.
Just my bus,
Um,
which is not
okay,
that big.
right. So we're a little top heavy. We can't really go when there's a lot of wind. It's really flippin' scary. I've got a new policy. If the wind speeds go over 20 miles per hour, we ain't going because taking that side swipes
Yep.
is not fun. But I just super scared of something happening in the winter. I drove it back from the docks in Baltimore through winter weather in the mountains, and I was like, not doing that again. um,
City, right? So you guys have like some pretty neutral weather, which is good.
yeah, we still get winter for sure and everything, and it gets cold enough. But we actually were pretty mild up until the middle of November. So that's normally I'll have the bus out and running from late March. By then we're usually warm and stuff is stopped. And then into end of October, beginning of November, just kind of depending on how the weather goes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to be looking for finding like a winter home. I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to find somewhere that I could actually set it up and run it a couple days a week as the shop. I just didn't get my crap together last year, so well, at least not in time. I had a couple things go wrong. I thought that I would have more time, and then it got cold, and it's a diesel. It gels up, and at a certain point, he just literally doesn't go again until you get warm enough.
Yep. Yep. Flo does this.
So
What's
yeah.
your bus's name again? So everyone knows.
His name is Dobby, Dobby the Double Decker. He is named after the house elf in Harry Potter, because I don't know if you all remember the character, but he starts off being a little ornery. He gets Harry in trouble a lot, but his heart's in the good place. So my beginning relationship with my boss was a lot like that, and still today, sometimes it's still like that. But
Oh,
in the end, Dobby saves Harry's life, and I'm banking on that happening at some
oh
point.
yeah. Precious. Oh my gosh. He is saving your life. He's saving your life by giving you lots of gray hairs and giving you cool stories. And
Right.
you have gray hairs. I didn't mean that like you have them. I just meant figuratively.
Some days, hitting the late 30s, I'll see one or two spark in, but normally I've got mine colored something funky, so it hides it anyways.
Yeah, I know. Usually my funky hair colored sister. What happened to it this time? It's all blonde and glorious now.
It's just actually the blue that I use. Every time you wash it, it gets a little, it's called denim.
Okay.
And literally it's like every time you wash jeans and they get a little lighter and a little lighter, it does that with a hair color. So it starts off like
Actually,
a
the acid wash stage.
right. And so it starts off at like a really dark blue that's like almost like a navy. And then by the end of about 2.5 months or so that it lasts, you have it, you can't tell in this lighting, but it's like really light blue.
Yeah, so cool. I love it.
Yep,
Well,
yep.
so I know your story, but and some of our Bus Biz Babe people know it, but what inspired you to get a freaking double decker bus? Like, what is the story behind that?
So I've been running, kind of doing pop-ups for the vintage shop for several years, and I had a friend who had a traditional vintage retail store. And she kept telling me over and over again, like, man, when you've got a brick and mortar, you are just tied to the space. You're tied to whatever happens social economically in the neighborhood. If you don't own the building, she was ousted out of 2 different places due to somebody offering them more money, you know, she's like, you just kind of stuck. And then of course, when you have a business like that, people are kind of expect you to be there 7 days a week from a certain time frame. And I'm like, man, I really would like to like make this thing bigger than popping up in a tent over and over again. And just what I did online, but I don't want to be kind of stuck with some of the stuff that happens with traditional retail. Not that it's bad, it's just there's a lot to each of that. And I had seen like the cute little Can-Am campers, and I'm like, that's adorable. You can't fit anything in it. Right? And I'm like, okay. And then I saw like little baby buses, and they're super cute. And again, you're like, all right. I'm like, so what would be big enough? And then on top of that, kind of, right. And then on top of that, kind of be like a bit of a showstopper, because here in the States, we don't see them very often. Right. And so I got this idea in my head that I needed a double-decker bus. And I spent 2 years trying to find one in stateside.
Yeah.
And they wanted like $15,000 for shells that were like no windows, no engine, like literally a frame, right?
Yeah. Like Volkswagens, people are freaking out of their minds.
Right. And if you found one that ran, they were easily somewhere between 35 to 40,000, and that was like a basic thing, right? And you still wouldn't have to do all the conversion and everything I needed to do. So started looking overseas, and like, England, they're a freaking dime a dozen. And so it was just a matter of like, well, I know I can afford it.
Yeah.
Now can I make it happen? And it is sort of amazing that it did as quickly as it did.
Yeah.
Like, I met up with the gentleman in Manchester. I spoke to him in October and talked about some availability, and then planned a date to go in November. Bought the bus then on site, brought enough money kind of for what we were between a couple of them that I'd seen online, and then just kind of looking at the inspection. And then it was on a boat and in Baltimore on December 27th, on the last.
That's insane. I don't remember
that of the year.
No, that's bananas.
So every step of the way basically connected me to the next step, because there was a lot of stuff I just wouldn't have any idea. Like, I didn't know I had to pay someone to be able to take me to the dock. Like, you can't just go on the dock.
Right.
So the guy who sold me the bus put me in touch with the shipping company. The shipping company put me in touch with a customs agency, because you, as an average person, don't actually deal with the customs agents. You actually hire someone to do that. And so there's a lot of back and forth with them for all of the nitty gritty paperwork. And then the customs agency is the one who gets you in touch with the dock people.
Things you learn, man. I did the same thing with getting the bus towed up from where I bought it from. I was like, oh, I gotta get a bid going for a towing agency. Like, I didn't know I had to do this, but you figure it out and you make it happen.
Right. It was just kind of nice that everybody else had done something like it before. So they were like, well, when I did this, then I want to use this person. And so it fell together pretty quickly for that part of it. And that actually went relatively smooth for how it could have gone.
Yeah.
The getting home part was the rough part.
Right. Oh my goodness, that's incredible. I think your story is just so phenomenal of like what women have the power to do.
Right. It is kind of funny is I had not drove anything quite that big, and it is a right-hand drive because it's a British bus, so you're driving on the opposite side. But the number one thing I get asked when I have it at shows, it's usually followed by 2 things. And the first one is like, does it drive? And I'm like, well, did you see it here before? How do you think it got here? And then the second follow-up to that is, did you drive it?
Huh?
And I'm kind of like, and 90% of the time, it is only me doing shows on the bus. If we do something local, my boyfriend may help. If I do something where I think I'm gonna have something really big, I may have a friend help. But most of the time, it's just me. There's no one else on the bus. And I'm like, I got a little magical elf fairy who drives it. No, yeah, it's me.
That'd be great.
I'm that magical
one.
right. But it always blows people's minds that I'm the one that drives it. And on the rare occasion my boyfriend does come, he just kind of always sits in the driver's seat, kind of out of the way. And every man that gets on the bus starts talking to him about it. And he just looks at him and he's like, and they ask him things, he's like, I don't know, it's her bus.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they look and they're like, what? I mean, with the mechanics, I'm like,
the woman.
Right? I'm like, well, I don't do them physically myself. I hire a mechanic, but he's got no idea other than like he helps me with the batteries and stuff like that.
So funny. I get the same exact thing with mine, and it's just, it's so weird that that is the reaction in 2020 from people, but whatever. But what is your favorite part about owning your business? I know there's lots of facets to it. I'm sure there's lots to love, but what's your
For me, actually, I kind of viewed it as I had a corporate job for most of my life until about 4.5, 5 years ago, and I lost my job twice in a 9-month period. And I've been doing this as a hobby in between, but I kept always putting it off as like, okay, well, if I make this much consistently, then maybe I could quit my job. And then that never happened. And my friend's like, you're just kind of giving yourself the golden handcuffs, is what she referred to it. And it's true. When you have a corporate job and you know that you're going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks and you know what it's going to be, it's pretty darn easy to plan. There's a lot of security to that. Yeah. But on the other hand, you give a lot of yourself to something that is, for me, what I ended up finding was like kind of soul sucking. I found myself basically crushing most of my creativity because I was the account person in the middle, and like, that's what the creators did, or that's what this person did, and you're only supposed to be like this. Yeah. And so the second time it happened, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. I got a 3-month severance. If I can't make enough to pay the mortgage by the time this is done, then I'll consider going back to a more corporate type thing. But what I've told people is like the relief from running the business. I mean, there's just stresses to it. I mean, like I said, It's not nearly as secure. This year's been insane. But the sheer feeling of getting your soul back is probably one of my favorite things about doing this as, a more full-time type gig.
Right. Well, and probably discovering parts of yourself and your soul too, that you were like, oh my gosh, I unlocked this part of myself that like I had no idea I loved,
Right. And for me, I had started it even as a hobby, as a relief from my job. Like, I was that kind of person who was always at work and then brought my laptop home. And because I wasn't married and didn't have children, there was this expectation that, oh, well, you've got the time, right? And I was getting emails and phone calls late into the night, early in the morning. And I found that if I didn't give myself something else to do, the guilt that I was basically forcing myself to continue to work even more. And I was salary, like I wouldn't get paid for those extra hours, right? But I felt like if I didn't have a good enough reason to do something else, then the expectation was that then I just basically work all the time. Yeah. So I gave myself a different job.
Yes.
But that job comes with treasure hunting, as what I refer to as a vintage hunt, and then like doing the research on the things that I found and what makes them cool, and that way I can share some of that with the people who buy from me. I tell people I might not be able to give them full information on stuff, but almost everything in my shop I can at least tell you what era it came from. If it's got a maker's mark, I can give you some facts and some history about it. And give you at least this capsule a bit of what the history was in the piece. And personally, I kind of like that. I like giving old things new life, you know,
Yeah, of
and making them
course.
special for someone else.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of that so much and feel so similarly. And I'm just so proud of you for like just doing that, because I know it takes so much. Like I just recently, because of COVID-19, told my main job that I won't be able to work there in the same capacity. It's not a stable job like normal 9 to 5s even to
Yeah.
begin with, but it was like more stable than my regular hustle. And just having the time now to recognize, oh my gosh, I have all this time and all this energy and all of this ambition. I got to make sure I'm using this well, you know, while I can. And I think that it takes courage, and like I just applaud you so much for doing it, because I think it's going to be an inspiration to so many people who, you know, who aren't there yet, you know, and just to see people like us, like we're just people, like we're doing it and we're just regular people, you know?
Well, and, you know, and I've told people, I'm like, I don't make what I made when I had a corporate job, right? So the expectations for that are a little different. But I haven't lost a house.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like, you know, so maybe we don't get to go on trips out of the country every year. We try for every like 3, right? You know, then sometimes
Priorities change.
right, you may get a little bit of differences on, you know, where and how you spend your money and that kind of stuff. But you know, the ability to not necessarily be forced to always go to the same spot day after day after day to do the same things, it is actually, I think, so refreshing. You know, I have friends who every time, you know, after a while they start asking me like, well, what do you do with yourself? What do you mean, what do I do? I'm like, I'm the only one on this thing,
Yeah,
right? So everything you see,
of everything
right,
you do.
right, everything you see here, I have found, I have cleaned, I have inventoried, I have researched, I have tagged, I've put out on display, I've photographed, I've done listings. You know, so yeah, maybe I'm not tied to my computer every day, but that day maybe that meant that I was doing the photos for something, or I was out looking for stuff. I mean, there's never a day completely that I don't do something related to running my vintage business, even if it's just the day that I ship out stuff, you know, or things like that. But I don't have to do it on the same rigorous schedule and be at that mercy. You know, I am not a morning person. I prefer to not get up before 9 if I don't have to. But I will be up late working on stuff, you know, and on a given night, I might be up at midnight working on button earrings or tagging stuff or like posting things to one of the sites because I'm like, I can do it on my phone when I sit here, you know, and
We're never not working, right? That's the biggest
right. Like I probably work more in a certain way, and I worked a lot, right?
Yeah, but
it's different.
It's a different connection and a different brain set.
Right. It's different when it's for yourself, and you know you're only as successful really as what you kind of can make yourself be. And so there is some discipline that you have to have. Like it's not magic. I still have to do the listings. I still need to put in the work, and things like that. But I also can't fire myself. You would be in a world of hurt without me. You know, there would be no business. And I feel like I get to be just a lot more of who I actually am as a person.
Yeah.
You know, I had a pretty conservative job in which, you know, I would never be able to have the number of tattoos I have and the hair color I have. They thought it was weird that I was quite literally told at one point that I was not allowed to have facial piercings because I went and got some additional ear piercings, and that was like,
oh no.
right? And my boss, like, I got like, it wasn't even big, right? I think I got the tragus and like, you know, something else done. And I came in with them, and she's like, called me to her office to sit down, and she's like, I noticed you got new piercings. Yeah, in my ears.
You liked them?
Right? It's just, that's fine, but we need to discuss the fact that you cannot get facial piercings.
My goodness gracious.
Right? And I'm like,
you.
okay. So I always felt that the type of job I worked in was very much in a way superficial based on a lot of appearance. And I'm like, I've never been a very traditionally looking person to begin with, or at least the traditionally attractive type. I've not, blonde, leggy with, big boobs. That just doesn't work. That's not how I'm built. Some people are blessed. I look like me, right? And, the more funky I am, I feel the better I actually felt in my skin.
Yes.
And for a long time, I was constantly more worried about how I was being perceived because that kept coming up over and over again in my reviews and in conversations with people in leadership and things, that it didn't matter necessarily how good my work was. And so, honestly, being able to be in this kind of a business, I don't have to worry about some of that superficial bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
I just get to be who I am, and I think that makes my business more authentic.
Yep. It makes it more authentic. It makes it more fun. It makes it more you. I think that way about some of the clothing pieces I've been buying during quarantine, like my glitter cloak. I'm like, this is like my part of my uniform now. Like, this is like part of my brand. Like, I am building my persona of like my brand and my business with this. And yeah, it's like the most fun part. But so we can kind of roll into that question of like, what's some advice you have to someone who's looking to start their own business, who wants to make their passion their main hustle, kind of something along those lines?
You do need to have some sort of kind of planning and at least a little bit of financial understandings on about how to go about pricing and things like that in order to be successful. And that's stuff that you sort of learn because it differs depending on what your product is in your market, for sure. But knowing some of that kind of stuff that seems like a little more having a plan and being a little more strategic about stuff is sometimes hard for people who are the artsy entrepreneurial types.
Yeah.
But you do need to kind of keep some of that in mind, I think, in order to be successful. Like I went into my, and I've grown and changed, quite a bit. But when I first started, I kind of bought a little bit of everything in the vintage before I decided I was mainly going to do accessories and jewelry and clothes.
Yeah.
Having 2 tubs full of glassware break changes your mind pretty quick on some of that. Right? We're like, oh, okay, there went half of my inventory in like one afternoon. But when I started, I just was like following a method that somebody had told me where they're like, well, whatever you bought it for, make it 3 or 4 times. Sometimes I got really lucky and I got something for 50 cents that was worth like way more than that, right? So I was undervaluing myself. And so I started to try to make it where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be the flea market finds, right? And I don't want to be so elite that people who are just learning about vintage or just trying to build their wardrobe or capsules can't afford it. Right. I kind of want to be here in the middle, and I want to have a range. I want to have stuff that if you're just starting out and you've got 20 bucks, I've got some really cool things for you. And then if you're starting to, I don't know, maybe get more into Southwestern and Native American pieces, and you have a little more to invest in some good sterling or something like that, then I've got some pieces up here that are a little more high end. And I don't think the most expensive thing in my shop is like $500, which is high, but it's like a gold ring, and it's still pretty reasonable for what it is. Mm-hmm. And so when you're starting, I think kind of having an idea of who is my market, how much money do they have, how much do I need to price things for and make on something in order to actually make it worth the time that I put in, but still be of value to them, is kind of big stuff. Because especially in the beginning, there's a lot of startup costs, and you're investing in a lot of materials and product in order to have enough to sell or to build up an inventory even or something like that. And I found myself back in the beginning buying whatever I could buy and afford to have stuff. And then as I've grown, weeding that down into, I probably would never buy this again, but now I have something over here. And even, on the art side, you can't have everything be giant paintings that are several $100s, because those only appeal to a small target market. But you know, what can you do that's still within your aesthetic that gives you price points at several different areas that make it easier for someone to maybe spend or buy multiples.
Yeah.
And that way your pricing structure supports you in order to have enough money, that if you're going to make a living out of it, that you still have enough money to reinvest
Hmm.
and grow your product, but then you also have the money that's going to pay for you to eat and have electricity.
Yeah. You should like freaking teach like a small business course or something, because all of that was like, people need to be writing this down. Like all of that's such good points that's like transferable between, I think, genres of small businesses too. Like it's not just vintage, it's not just makers. It's like that can be related to anything. Like that's so good.
And there's, well, I mean, a lot of it comes with trial and error, right? You know, when you start out, a lot of times
Yep.
you try shows, maybe 3 years down the road, you're like, I can't believe I did that show, right? But it was $25 or $50, or, you know, but each of them, I think you, as you look through them, you got to look at like, what did you learn at each one and what can you apply? How can you create a like expectation list of like, I'm only going to do shows that meet X, Y, and Z because those are the ones that I know I do
Yeah.
well at. And part of that is experience,
Yeah.
and being willing to try new things and stuff like that, and growth. You know, but I think that's the biggest thing is if you could, I think I would have saved myself a little bit of trouble going in if I had a more clear idea of what it was I wanted my business to specialize in versus, like I said at the beginning, I just picked up whatever vintage stuff I thought was pretty.
Right.
You know, and I didn't have as clear of a brand and a look and a feel. And I, you know, I think that kind of helps. And if you know that there's a way that you can differentiate your business, something that makes whatever you do
Like a
special.
giant double-decker bus. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Or you're really good at painting dog portraits.
Yeah.
You know? Like that's a huge thing now. Everybody loves their pets. Pet stuff is massive, you know. So what is it about yourself or your business that you think kind of sets you apart? And then who do you want your audience to be, or you know, is actually your audience? Sometimes we think who we're selling to is different than who's actually buying. So you need to be you need to kind of watch, like when you're doing shows, who's actually buying your product versus like, for instance, I've done shows where I've watched girls walk by and complete like rockabilly outfits that I thought for sure were going to buy something vintage from me, and they didn't. They didn't even stop. But then I realized they're not actually wearing vintage, they're wearing new stuff.
Yes, that looks vintage.
That looks vintage, that they're buying from a specific place, because it's not really how it was actually cut back then, you know? And so that isn't my target market. You know, I've got a lot of folks that are like me who incorporate pieces into their everyday wardrobe. So they're not usually full blown, I only wear vintage or vintage inspired. It's a lot of, I mix and match, which is kind of how my personal aesthetic is.
Yeah. It's funny. I had the same thing happen with like being surprised at who my market was when after a few shows I realized like teenage girls, like middle school, and then like teenage girls, like kind of all within like middle school, high school range, were like obsessed with my stuff and just wanted to hang out. They just wanted to hang out at the bus. They were like, and so I bring pillows with me and blankets everywhere. So that way, because sometimes if I'm at a festival or something, like the teens will be able to go run off and be by themselves for a little bit. And then they want to just sit and hang. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, let's hang out. And then, you know, they'll be there for like over an hour. And then the parents are like, oh, I feel bad that my kid's been here the whole time. Let me buy something from you.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, great. It was fine. I liked having you here, but this is perfect for both of us now.
Right. No, I've kind of experienced that too. I think sometimes, and most of the time it's perfectly fine if I'm not super busy, but I've had a lot of teenagers kind of hang out at the bus, and I think it's because they don't see people doing things different very often.
100%.
Right? I mean, I was that kid. I did everything by the book. I worked really hard in high school, was, you know, co-valedictorian. I knew I was going to college. I finished college in 3 years. I had an internship lined up that led to a job right after. I went directly into working in the field that I had majored in. I checked my boxes, I dotted my I's, I crossed my T's. I did everything I was supposed to do, and was miserable.
Yeah, right.
Or even that, I still got like, you were still just a cog in the machine, right? When I lost my jobs both times, it wasn't due to performance. That was made really clear. It was basically economics. People are the expensive part of running a business. We lost clients. Somebody in New Jersey made a budgeting error, and the $750,000 that I was going to launch products with went away.
Oh, I'm sorry for my state representing so poorly.
Right. But I mean, that's what would happen in the world that I lived in, is literally someone over here didn't budget correctly. And someone over here assumed that this money was coming from somewhere, and the money didn't happen. And little me in Kansas City lost my job, right? And it's just kind of, it's an unfortunate thing, but kind of the nature of the business that I was in. And after a while, you're like, yeah, I just don't want to be stuck in that cycle. It was hard, and I don't know what my parents, they've not been together since I was a kid. So, but I told them both separately, and they're both relatively cool about the fact that I was like, hey, I'm not gonna go back to like a regular job.
Yeah.
Right. But I think I'm sure they were both like, oh, what the hell was college for, right?
But you know what? But it was like a season. You needed that experience to get
right.
So no matter
I mean, I apply all sorts of stuff that I learned. I mean, I have a degree that's specialized, but it's a communications and marketing degree. And it's not like I haven't used that for the rest of everything I do, right? So, I mean, that I understand brand management and things. I just don't have the budgets I had when I had clients.
Yes, right, exactly.
I don't have that kind of marketing money, or this would be a whole different ballgame. But, it's not like none of that went to waste really in my mind, but it was hard to break out of that, and I think for kids that see us do something different, you don't necessarily think I could start my own business and do it in something really cool or fun until, especially because like I do a lot of shows in the Midwest, and so I've done some smaller towns. And I think they just didn't know that they could do it.
That was an option, exactly.
Right.
Well, that's what we say to kids, like, or anyone, even adults will come up to me and say, like, you're living my dream. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? Like, what can you do to make it happen? Like, I know that that's not an easy question to answer, and that's pretty loaded, but like, what are some small steps you can take to actually doing it? Like, and you have to ask yourself that, or else it's not a dream that you want to make a reality. It's just a nice thing that you think about sometimes.
Right.
And I'm like such a freaking drill sergeant of pursuing what you love as your main gig, because what else are you doing with your life? Like, not everyone has to do that. And I've come to terms with that not everyone wants their dream job to be their dream job. They just want it as their dream hustle or practice or hobby, which is fine. But if you have that reaction to watching me do this and I'm telling you this is my job, then freaking figure it out, man. Like, and it's like, there's so much to it, but just knowing that that's an option and watching people react to like, oh, I can do that, is the coolest thing. Like, there's a gal that I met at a show that I was the only vendor there. I was like a specialized person at this like fall festival. Mm-hmm. And so she followed me on Instagram and I followed her, and she's an artist, and she actually made like this little illustration of herself in a bus with like art supplies coming out of it. And she was like, someday I'll have my art mobile. And I like commented on her picture. I'm like, this is so cute. She goes, yeah, like you inspired me like to get my own like mobile thing someday. And I'm like, oh my God, like I hope you make it happen. Like, please do it, because it's we need more people doing what they love, even if it's somewhat related to what you're doing. There's no room for competition anymore in terms of like societal pressures and just you know, mental health, it's like not worth it. Like, what can we do to like work alongside of other makers that might be making something similar to us, or, you know, collaborate in that way? And it's just exciting to inspire people that way, and just to get in their face about it and make it serious. Like, I'm like dead serious when I tell people, like, well, like, what do you do for fun, and what is the thing that you want to do? Why aren't you doing it more? What's the thing that's in your way? And like, not that that's going to be an easy thing to answer, but just putting that seed in their head of like, oh, I can give myself the time to think about this, even, like, huge. So
I think there are a lot of people that get stuck in the golden handcuffs, as they like to call them, you know, and the security of knowing. And if anything, I think maybe this year kind of might show people that that security is sort of in our heads.
Yes.
Because we've been taught that, you know, if you do these things and you do this stuff and you get these jobs. And I saw that even beforehand. I mean, I wasn't too long into my career before we had the economic downturn in 2009. And the agency I worked at then got rid of 25% of their workforce in a day. I watched 20 people walk out, you know, without jobs. And that was tough. And I made it through that one, you know, and I'm like, I guess I'm lucky that I made it a decade before the first time I got let go. And especially in the career that I had, because you don't think that that might not be there. And I think this time around, and I'm hoping that a lot of people took the COVID situation and maybe sat and thought about, you know, what could they be doing differently that would make them happier. Because if you didn't have the same expectations of where you had to be and how you had to do something, you know, what did you do with your time, and how did you fill it, and is it something that you could turn into a gig? Or even if not, is it something that, if you know you wanted to pursue more of, is it something? Right. And maybe taking a step back from it a little bit and realizing, like, okay, there is more than necessarily going into the 9 to 5 all the time and stuff. And I think even for mainstream employers, this might have changed a lot of views about people being able to work from home more often, or even, you know, doing it maybe once or twice a week. And I think people would be, even staying in the corporate jobs, healthier and in better spirits, because sometimes it's just the drudgery of going in every day. Where a change of scene, the ability to say, I'm going to take my lunch break and I'm going to go out to my backyard and sunbathe for 30 minutes, or, you know, just breaking it up differently than what you would if you were in that structured environment all the time. I actually think will end up helping a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, that's connected to the next question of how have you pivoted during these times?
Well, for me, like I said, I would have normally been out with the bus starting back in March, and all of the shows that we were booked for have been either canceled or relocated or moved around somewhere. I think my first one really will be in about 2 weeks down in Oklahoma. And I'm excited and also a little nervous because I'm like, man, that's a big drive for the first outing of the year.
Yeah, right.
Here we are in June. But I always find myself, once I do get the bus running, since it only works, you know, I'm only using it for about 8 months of the year, I try to book something almost every weekend. And so it is a grind, right, of, you know, drive to the location, set everything up, do the show, drive back home, put it away for like 3 or 4 days, reload some fresh stuff. I work my other part-time job and then go on to the next one. And I, you know, not having to have something every weekend and actually having to fill my weekends again has been different. And so that's where this time around I experimented with some stuff that I really was kind of excited about doing, that I've seen other people do. So I have been ice tie-dyeing things, which I don't, you know, if everybody's seen the ice tie-dye, but basically it's the process of tie-dye, but using the ice actually dilutes the color. So when you wash it all out, it comes out like really pretty pastel watercolors versus your real bright tie-dye. So I've been doing that with a lot of white pieces. I took a lot of vintage that I kind of had stored away that was like, this is from the 30s and it's kind of dingy, but it's structurally fine.
Yeah.
So now it's got a new color, and so I did that, and I started bleach dyeing stuff because I can't just do one thing. And so
Same.
right. So I've got a bunch of denim pieces that I've done like more the dip dye and things, doing those, and then I've done most of them black t-shirts, but the tie dye using the bleach and things like that, and then using the extra materials that I've had over from doing things like making cutoffs, or I've had some pieces that got sun bleached on the bus where a strip of it's bad, so I can't sell it. I've been turning those into button earrings, so little fabric covered button earrings, and reusing some materials. And I've been making more pieces with the crystals that I actually dug myself in Arkansas back in October.
Oh.
And so I did like straight from the ground, the whole cleaning process, which is
That's right. I remember you got those. Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been working on making like little studs with the tiny crystals and the pendants. And so that's actually what my raffle prize will be, is one of the pendants from literally a crystal I dug myself, cleaned, and then turned into a pendant. And so the earth made it, but basically from start to finish, I've been the one who dug it from the ground and did all the work with it. So excited to kind of share that with people. And that's just kind of stuff that is, again, I am a vintage seller, but that allows me to be creative within my vintage world, and show some of that more, I wouldn't say artistic. I'm really not artistic in any way, shape, or form, but it gives me that kind of creative outlet on some stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then I've kind of expanded some of my online markets. I was mainly selling on Etsy, which is still kind of my primary one, but I've also started offering things on Instagram, joined Depop, and so I've got a lot more of the clothing there. And then just recently, I found a friend recommended an app that allows you to cross post to different marketplaces, and so I was able to import a lot of my Etsy things and post them to Mercari and Poshmark.
Cool. Sweet.
So that was kind of a nice tool, because part of the reason I hadn't done a lot more online markets is just the constant copying and pasting everything in and all the time, and this simplifies that process. And so I'm like, well, it helps me if I've got them in 4 different places, maybe it'll sell, So I've been really working on expanding those markets, and I've listed a lot more clothing than I've ever done before. And so, because mainly the clothing was something I primarily just sold on the bus, because clothing takes so much more to list online, especially for individual pieces.
Everything,
right? When you've got, if you can sell 20 of one thing, that doesn't take as much time, but every single one of my pieces has to be photographed and measured and all of that, and any flaws listed, because they're vintage pieces. And so, I came up with an entire form that I use now that's like, here are all my measurements, and here's and I have to go through every piece as I do the photos and stuff and do all of that to go back and enter it. So having the time to do it, I think I've added somewhere in the realm of 150 pieces of clothing in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, that's so great.
So
that's awesome.
now I'll just be managing it once I do get started on the bus again. If something sells there, then I gotta go and take it off of like 5 places.
Oh shoot, yeah, that'll be the tricky part.
Right.
Bridge when we get there.
Right. We'll worry about that later.
You'll sell out of everything, and then you'll have to get all new stuff for the bus.
Right. The treasure hunting's the really, really fun part. So I wouldn't mind that.
Right. Oh, that's so fun. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking some time today and chatting with me. And I think that your story is just the best and so unique and inspiring for others to kind of get thinking, because maybe someone else has had a vision of having a dream of having a shop in some kind of crazy vehicle, and it takes just seeing someone doing it to give them some spark. So I think that that's really cool that you do that for people.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, friend. Well, have a great rest of your night. We will talk again soon. Thank you for being part of our market.
Yay, thanks for hosting.
Yeah, of course. All right. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.